important infrastructure or areas on the farm, what we refer to as the big greenhouse, which is greenhouse plot 1A. And the reason we have these 1A connotations and 1B is we were going to make this greenhouse roll. From this plot to that plot, and that would open up the ground and allow winter and early crop rotation or early crop start, and then move, so you're getting cold weather crops or cooler weather crops started earlier, and then when the weather's favorable for them to be outside, you move the greenhouse, get your warm ones growing, and you've gotten at least a month head start by having this rolling cold frame.
Oh, great idea.
When we cleared and leveled this area, we were going to do 4 rolling greenhouses was the original plan, and then we soon realized, had we gone ahead, I don't know where the money was going to come from for that, maybe one a year at a time, and we make them roll, we wouldn't have had enough market places. Like we didn't know where we were going to unload that volume. Now you're having to step right into the wholesale market, and for us that wasn't something that was going to work, because now we were just not producing enough volume to be able to compete in that category. So at least we didn't have the resources to figure out how to do it. Maybe we could have, but and maybe we could do it now, but the way we're marketing at farmers markets, a CSA box program and a farm stand, it's working for us. But this piece of infrastructure was definitely key in helping us have early spring greens and cool weather crops, and then provided incredible winter protection up until Christmas to have lettuce and spinach and stuff like that growing under protection. We learned the hard way that a greenhouse doesn't magically make you grow food, and it doesn't make the food you do learn how to grow. You can't do it all year. The greenhouse environment is really specific at certain times of the years to certain crops. And then the other thing that you fight is light levels drop. So even if you were keeping it warm, you have to address the light issue so that plants aren't going dormant or stretching and getting too tall. And then if you were to address the temperature and the light, you now have to address the humidity levels and venting on a day where it might be clear but cold. We're going to have -5 or -8 degree air being circulated in and chilling crops or something. So we learned to just treat the greenhouse as a kind of like helper. It helps us do a month earlier what we would normally be able to do outside, and then it makes things last about a month longer of temperature, which helps with the growth into about October. And then there's some stuff like different mustards, bok choy, stuff like that. They'll continue to grow a little bit beyond that time frame, but not much. You're not gonna, if you planted something in October, I'm not sure that it would be ready by Christmas. But it'll grow. It just might not grow enough where, let's say, the end of March, if we have bok choy in this greenhouse, we'll be able to harvest from it weekly. So there's a significant difference in growth. Plus, in March, we're gaining daylight at almost 42 minutes a week in 1 week right around the equinox, and then we lose it again in the fall. So during the fall equinox, that light drop, when it starts on the steepest curve, can be 42 minutes a week of light loss. So over 2 weeks, you're losing almost close to an hour or more out of your total daylight, and it's fast. It seems to happen a lot quicker. Maybe it seems to happen faster. It's like a pot of water; it'll never boil if you're watching it. Well, when you're watching plants, they sure stop growing in a hurry, it seems like.
So you take all that into account, especially planning what you can take to the market and what is going to be ready and that kind of thing.
Yeah, so come that time of the year, like what we'll do in the spring is this will be full of greens and spinach and mustards and bok choy. We know that these warm weather crops are going to have to be in here by, I think Cindy mentioned, mid to the end of April. So by the time we get them started in our small germination greenhouse, look after them, get them in the ground, love them up. We have estimated harvest dates from the minute that first harvest date starts. We want to get as much of that crop out of the ground before these have to go in, and we want to do it before anything bolts because it's been too hot or too sunny,
Right.
or gets nasty tasting, and then and we don't want to waste it. We don't want to hang on to it and not sell enough the whole time. So there's that kind of balancing act. And sometimes, like this year, we would be doing quadrants. So if you divided the greenhouse into 4 quadrants, we'd be doing 1 quadrant every week and emptying it and amending it and getting plants in, and then work our way all around the greenhouse and then try to pick and choose, because we're trying to transition from stuff in here to the stuff outside so that we have a consistent happiness factor with our customers. So from this, now that these aren't rolling
Incredible.
and we had the other plots established, outside we have 3 more greenhouse plots, as we refer to them, and these outside plots are divided into 3 different families. So we have the nightshades, our eggplant, tomatoes, and peppers. That's where this is in 1B this year. Last year, it was in one of the other plots. I can't remember which one. And then in plot 2A this year is all the legumes, so peas and beans, which will help for nitrogen fixation for those plants this year. And then when that material is died back and broken down and into the soil, it will provide nitrogen for the next crop.
Oh, okay.
I've heard people saying like clover and peas, and they are nitrogen fixing, and someone might correct me on this, but so far all of my understanding and the reading I've done is showing that the nitrogen is only available to the host crop that the bacteria are working with. The nitrogen is tied up in that plant.
Yeah.
It's not producing nitrogen for everybody else. So when that crop gets churned down into the soil and breaks down, that nitrogen becomes free for whoever is available to use it. So either a cash crop, or a cover crop this winter, and some of it will be available for next year and still in the form of organic matter that hadn't broken down all year. And so let's say the legumes are there, the tomatoes are here. Next year, the tomatoes might go to that crop. The legumes will move to 2B, and 2B, which is our cucurbits, all the cucumbers and zucchini, and there might be one row of winter squash. That will then transition over to 2B. And every year we keep this rotation going with those outside, and that hopefully enables a lot more healthy soil. And we're not pulling the same stuff out of the soil all the time. And then our greenhouse, even though we'll do a lot of tomatoes in here every summer, there's a different crop rotation that happens through the winter, so other plants can uptake and break that nutrient cycle or disease cycle or whatever might be going on in here, that people would get problems from.
So you have that all figured out, which plant will follow, say, the tomatoes, and we'll make the best out of that? Or
We used to. There was actually a fella, I can't remember his name, I knew it for a long time, but he was in Britain and they had a 7 crop plant rotation, with the belief being that, and I'm making this up because I can't remember, the brassicas conditioned the soil for the alliums, so your onions and shallots. So there's something to that. Permaculture people might have a better understanding of that, but for sure there could be some research to indicate why you would want to follow one crop with another one. You wouldn't want to follow, what would be a good example? A lot of root crops, like I'll use carrots maybe as an example. You wouldn't want to follow a really successful legume crop with carrots, because the carrots' demand is different. They don't want a ton of nitrogen. They want a ton of phosphorus available in the right amount, but it's a ton, I think, compared to other crops, so that they can develop their root. If they don't have enough phosphorus and they have a ton of nitrogen, you'll have all these beautiful looking carrot tops and you'll have no carrot. So there's a little bit to it. You can try to run an average, and that will give you a more consistent yield, but you still have to be aware of whether your soil has phosphorus in it or not. The amount of phosphorus that's available to plants changes depending on the type you're putting in there too. Whether it's like soft rock phosphate, which is hard granular stone, and a little bit of it becomes available every year.
Okay.
So let's say it's a 15% actual phosphorus amount in your amendment. If 3% of it becomes available in year 1, then 3% comes available in year 2. So when you add more phosphorus in year 2, you get an additional 3%. So you go 3, 6 until you get saturated at 15. Once you get to 15%, now you want to maintain that phosphorus amount by adding it the same amount every year, but you have to test to find out how much you need to add, because you can overdo it and then you're in trouble.
Whoa.
Yeah. And sometimes we miss things like that and we find out later. We're like, oh, that's why our carrot tops are 3 feet high and there's no carrot. As an example, I mean, I think that has happened, but not lately. Yeah, and then the small greenhouse is where we start everything. We can go up and have a quick look in there.
Sure.
Are we safe to come in? Are we safe to come in? So what ends up happening in here, we won't stay in here too long because it's hot, is we've got pallets that we utilize for all the tables because they're cheap, and it makes it a lot more affordable to use them. They last a long time. This center bed with the structure over it is a hot water table. So it's basically a sandbox full of sand with hot water pipes running through it. And the hot water is heated in a hot water tank that's then on a recirculation pump. Steve from Surprise Nursery had shown me his setup, and so I basically copied that. The recirculation pump is controlled by a thermostat. So that thermostat, which has the wire that's the big coil, right? They normally have a great big coil all the way around them. You just slowly straighten it out and then drill a hole and just shove it into the sand. And now it reads the table sand temperature, and when the table cools down, this thermostat turns the recirculation pump on and demands hot water goes through it, so it's set up like a recirculation system. It's off obviously at this time of the year, but having that heat and then dragging the poly over here every night and taking it off every day keeps the humidity up high and keeps a lot of temperature in. And so we get really good consistent germination that way. And then after things have germinated and they don't need to be on the heat, a lot of crops tend to like a little bit cooler temperature. Once they've germinated or sprouted, you can then take them off the heat and they'll still continue to grow, but they won't stretch and get all leggy and kind of crazy. We still have to keep in mind that we're doing this in February and March, and we can still get minus degree temperatures. So this greenhouse isn't heated, other than the fact that this table puts out heat, which is all paid for by electricity. So yeah, and then we're whatever we're in the end of May. No, June, it's June. Something now. So yeah, that's sort of the end of this for the season until we drag shade cloth up in here and use this for hardening off or curing onions, and maybe we'll hang our garlic and stuff in here and keep it a lot cooler but out of the direct sun. And then
How deep is
it's probably about 3 inches.
Oh, okay.
Not a lot, but enough to cover the hot water pipe of PEX, I think it is.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, so there's a piece of it there. That's just a drain, 1/2 inch PEX. It's probably 3/4 inch PEX actually around the whole thing. Yeah, it is, because I can see it on the hot water tank. And then, yeah, so there's that. And then the other things have to be hardened off. They can't just come from in here, which we have 2 layers of poly. I think each layer blocks, 10% of the UV light from the sun, maybe more. It might be drastically more than that, maybe even 25%. But now that they're behind 2 layers of poly, my math would say you have a reduction of say 10%, and then you have a reduction of that number by another 10%. So it's a compounding reduction every time. So we need to start taking things outside, and they go outside on these pallets, and this is the hardening off stage. So they'll go out there either on a cloudy day, or they'll get wheeled out for a few hours and brought back in again, so they don't get a sunburn and die. They need to build up the UV coating on their leaves so that they don't get sunburned like I do all the time. And then the other thing we came up with was, instead of moving all the plants all the time, we copied someone's idea, I guess, and we took a bunch of chain link top rail that we bought a hoop bender from, I think we ordered it through Johnny's Select Seeds. Can't remember his name right now either. But we bent the chain link top rail into hoops, and then I welded up some steel 2-inch square tubing with uprights and put wheels on it. And now that greenhouse just rolls over. And so instead of moving all the plants, we can just grab the bar and then just roll it as need be, crashing into the cart. But that's the idea anyways. And it's a lot more of a time saver. If I bring the bars down, Cindy would probably have an easier time. I think I probably designed it for myself. But
No, most of those are going to the compost. That's why they're that yellow. This is just me trying to save them and try to find a spot.
extras that go in.
They're extras, yeah. So
Yeah, and so this gives the plants that do come outside to start the hardening off process, we can roll that away and roll it back if we decide to, and we can roll it off and leave it off longer. And if we got anything we're worried about, like for nighttime when we close it up, we've also got 5-gallon pails that we filled full of concrete with big D-rings in it. And when we roll the greenhouse back, even though it's super heavy, the wind will still lift it up and move it. So we normally have 4 pails, and we anchor that thing down. And even then, in some windstorms we've had, it's been moved, but it hasn't left. So yeah, that's the greenhouse plots. How we'll go there.
What do you